So for the next part of this lesson, we need to reference the second page that you picked up with all the properties on it. It looks like this. All of the papers from today should be glued into your notebook. You might have to, especially with this one, just glue down one side so that you're able to fold it over and see it. But we will be referencing most of these properties a ton over the next few lessons. So additive identity property, first of all, is just the sum of any number and 0 is that number. And in all of these, you have numbers examples and algebraic examples. So this is anytime you add 0 to a number, you don't change the sum. Inverse property of addition is what we've been working quite a bit with at the beginning of this unit last week. So you wrote this down in your notebooks already. The sum of a number and its additive inverse is 0. And we talked about how additive inverse is a fancy word for opposite. So they're the same distance from 0 on a number line. And when I add them together, I get 0. The commutative property of addition says that I can switch around the order in which I'm adding, and I can only do this with addition and multiplication. So 3 plus 7 is the same sum as 7 plus 3, or algebraically, if I'm adding two variables together, I can switch around the order of those variables and it doesn't matter. The associative property says that I can switch my groupings without actually changing the sum. Again, this doesn't work in subtraction, so you would need to rewrite your problem using add the opposite first to have an addition problem. So notice that I move my parentheses from the 4 and the 5 to the 5 and the 2. But if I actually simplified this, I would get 9 plus 2 is 11, or I would get 4 plus 7 is 11. So changing the parentheses didn't change my answer. Additive inverse property is add the opposite. It's that poster up in the room. You also wrote it down in your notes. So it's saying that instead of writing something like 3 minus 7, which we're not used to seeing, what I can do is I can change subtraction to addition, and I can change the sign of the second number. Notice, and we talked about this last week, nothing happened to the 3. The sign of the first number stayed the same. Again, it works for something like a -8 minus a -2. Minus a negative is, we're not really used to seeing that. So I can, again, change the subtraction sign to addition and change the sign of the second number to a +2. This decomposition of mixed numbers and decimals is what you just practiced. So it's not really a property, but it's a strategy that we're going to be using to help us when we're solving equations that have more than one step. So you can always rewrite the problem instead of -3 1/3, for example. You could say -3 plus -1/3, and sometimes that will make the math that you have to do seem easier when you don't have access to a calculator. So you have that to access, and then the next page is just a couple of practice problems. All right. So here's an example that I want you to see where we would use some of these properties. So the problem that we started out with up here is -13 5/7 plus 6 minus 2/7. So there's 3 different pieces going on there. The very first thing that was done in this sample way to solve this problem, and just to start out at the beginning by saying this is not the only way to solve this problem, but rewriting this first piece as and add the opposite or using additive inverse property is a good way to start. So instead of saying 6 minus 2/7, we said 6 plus a -2/7. And then if we come over here, this was that strategy decomposing a mixed number. So instead of -13 5/7, that was decomposed to -13 plus a -5/7. Now, if you're kind of looking ahead, you might already just see the purpose of this, but this got us to a point where we have common denominators with the -5/7 and the -2/7 that we can combine later. So here, I have all addition now. I changed the subtraction to adding the opposite so I can use the commutative property of addition, which says I can switch around the order of my numbers. So because I've done that, I have negative 5/7 plus negative 2/7, which is very easy to simplify to negative 1, because when I put those together, I get negative 7/7. So I end up with negative 13 plus that negative 1, that was 7/7 simplified, plus 6. And you might need to go back to your rules poster, but these are like signs. They're both negative. So negative 13 plus negative 1. Add them together, keep the sign. Negative 14 plus 6. Now I have different signs. So negative 14 plus 6, I subtract the 2. 14 minus 6 is 8. And this 14 is the one that's further from 0, and it's negative, so that makes my answer a negative 8. The third paper that you should have picked up today has 2 separate problems on it. And what I want you to do is try both of these with a partner. Now what you might need to do is try the first one, come back, listen to the solution, and then go back and try the second one and listen to the solution. That's fine. But I want you to get some practice with this. So go ahead and pause this, and I will start talking in a couple seconds to give you time to find the pause. If I were solving this problem, I would first tackle this negative 12 1/4. If you are great with adding fractions in your head, this might be an unnecessary step for you. So I'm going to write 1 minus 3/4 plus negative 12 plus negative 1/4. And my reasoning was that decomposition strategy. Okay, now if I'm looking at this problem, what should stand out to me is I can't use commutative or associative property because of this. And so the very next thing that I would do is, let me switch back to pen, sorry. The very next thing that I would do is fix that subtraction. I would rewrite it using add the opposite as 1 plus a negative 3/4. And I've got plus negative 12 plus negative 1/4. And then the reason that I could do that is the additive inverse property. We are going to give you this kind of organizer for a lot of these multi-step problems, so that if this is helpful to you to sort of process out not only what you can do, but why you can do it, you'll have that as a resource. The next thing I should see is I have this negative 3/4 and negative 1/4, and I have all addition. So I can go ahead and use the commutative property to change around the order of my numbers. So I'll have 1 plus, I'm going to switch around the negative 12 and the negative 3/4. And I've still got the negative 1/4. And that was the commutative property. And now all I have left to do is simplify. Negative 3/4 plus a negative 1/4 is a negative 1. Because if I use a number line to figure this out, or I use my rules, I get negative 4/4, which is 1. And now I have 1 plus negative 12 plus a negative 1. Now, 1 plus negative 12 is negative 11, plus negative 1 is negative 12. And so negative 12 should have been the solution that you and your partner got for the first example. And let's flip over to the second example. So again, I'll give you a few seconds in case you need to pause before we'll start talking about it. So when I see this problem, I automatically see an issue. And the reason that I see an issue is because I'm not given a calculator, and I somehow have to deal with this Sorry, hold on. I somehow need to deal with this decimal and fraction issue. So the very first thing that I would do, 1/4 is a pretty easy fraction to convert to a decimal. If I think of 1/4 of a dollar, it's 25 cents. So I want to rewrite this as 3 plus -2/10 plus, I'll leave it as minus for now to not do too many things at once, minus 15 and 25/100ths. Now I notice that I've got 2 decimal places here, but only 1 here. So I want to make this, and let me just change the color so you can see it. I want to make this 0.20, 20/100ths. That's equivalent to 2/10. So what I want to do next is use my additive inverse property. So 3 plus -20/100ths plus a -15 and 25/100ths. And that's my additive inverse property. I'm going to use my commutative property to rewrite the order of which I'm going to do this math in. And I'm not even going to rewrite it. I'm just going to draw arrows to show you that this is what I'm simplifying first. But that is commutative property, even though I didn't rewrite the numbers to go in order, reading left to right. I'm still changing the order in which I would solve these problems. So I have 3 plus, and these are like numbers. They're both negative. So my rule is I'm going to add them together and keep their sign. So when I add them together, I get -15 and 45/100ths. And now I have different signs, so I subtract the 2, and I end up with negative, because this number is further from 0 and it's negative. I end up with -12 and 45/100ths. And that is all the practice that I left you for working with properties. We will be working with them throughout the next few lessons. But I do, if you end up with extra time, I would like for you to start the error analysis of your formative from yesterday that's due on Friday. All right, thanks guys. I'll see you tomorrow.